I heard her crying through the wall on my second night in the apartment. I didn't know then that it would cost me everything to care. The apartment was cheap for a reason. Paper-thin walls in a building that should have been condemned 10 years ago. I just started a new job across town and needed something fast. The landlord, this guy named Vernon who wore the same stained polo shirt to every interaction, had shown me the place in about 4 minutes. Working sink, working toilet, no visible mold, I'd taken it. The crying started around midnight. Soft at first, then building into these jagged sobs that sounded like someone was trying to stay quiet but couldn't. I lay there in my sleeping bag. I hadn't even unpacked my bed frame yet, listening to this stranger fall apart next door. The sobs would stop, then start again. Stop, start, like she was trying to pull herself together and failing. I almost knocked on her door that night. Got as far as the hallway before I realized how insane that would look. Some random guy she'd never met showing up at midnight because he heard her crying. So I went back to bed and listened to her until she finally went quiet around 3 in the morning. The next day I saw her in the parking lot. She was getting mail from the bank of rusted boxes near the entrance. Small woman, maybe 5'3", with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She was wearing scrubs with cartoon characters on them. Kids hospital maybe, or pediatrics. When she turned, I could see her face was puffy, eyes still swollen from crying. She caught me looking and I did that awkward half-wave thing people do. She didn't wave back, just grabbed her mail and walked quickly toward the building. I'm not the kind of person who gets involved in other people's problems. Never have been. I keep my head down, do my work, go home. I'd moved to this city specifically because nobody knew me here. Fresh start after a bad breakup, and a job I'd quit without having another one lined up. The kind of impulsive decision that looks brave, but is really just running away. But the crying became a pattern. Not every night, but maybe 3 or 4 times a week. Always late. Always that same sound of someone trying to stay quiet. Sometimes I'd hear a man's voice too. Deep, sharp. I couldn't make out words through the wall, but the tone was clear. Angry, controlling. Then silence. Then crying. I started coming home later, staying at the office, or driving around just to avoid being there when it started. It felt easier than lying in the dark listening to her break down on the other side of a thin wall. 3 weeks after I moved in, I ran into her at the grocery store. She was in the produce section, carefully examining apples like it was the most important decision of her day. I grabbed a basket and ended up in the same aisle, trying to decide if I needed vegetables or could survive another week on takeout. She dropped an apple. It rolled toward me, and I picked it up, handed it to her. "Thanks," she said. Her voice was quiet, tired. "No problem. I'm your neighbor, I think. Building C, apartment 2B. She looked at me more carefully then. "Oh, yeah, I'm Jenna. 2A Marcus." We stood there in that uncomfortable space where you've exchanged names but don't know what else to say. She had a bruise on her forearm, greenish yellow, a few days old. She saw me notice and pulled her sleeve down. "I should." She gestured vaguely toward her cart and started to walk away. "I hear you sometimes," I said. The words just came out. Through the wall. She stopped, turned back. Her face went red, then pale. "I'm sorry. I'll try to be quieter. That's not what I meant." I didn't know how to finish the thought. "Are you okay?" seemed stupid. Obviously, she wasn't okay. "I'm fine," she said, but her eyes were filling up. She blinked hard, grabbed her cart, and walked away quickly. I watched her abandon half her groceries at the self-checkout and leave. After that, I didn't see her for 2 weeks. Her car stayed parked in the same spot. I'd see her window light on at night, sometimes moving shadows. But she wasn't coming out, at least not when I was around. The crying stopped too. Either she'd found a way to be quieter or something had changed. I told myself that was good, that maybe whatever was happening had resolved itself. That I should focus on my own life and stop obsessing over a neighbor I'd barely spoken to. Then one night, I heard the crash. Not crying. Something heavy hitting the wall between our apartments. A thud that shook the picture frame I'd finally hung. Then shouting. His voice, loud enough that I could make out words now. "You don't get to leave. Where are you going to go? You can't even afford this place without me." I sat up in bed. Another crash. Something breaking. Then her voice, higher, scared. "Please stop. Just stop. I should have called the police. That's what you're supposed to do." But I stood there in my bedroom frozen, phone in hand, thinking about how I'd heard the walls were thin, how I didn't actually know what was happening, how maybe they were just arguing. All the excuses people make when they don't want to get involved. Then I heard her scream. I was at her door before I'd really decided to move. Banging on it, yelling, "Jenna, open the door. Everything okay in there?" The apartment went silent. Completely silent. I could hear my own breathing, feel my heart pounding. The door opened. A man stood there. Tall, probably 6'1", wearing jeans and a t-shirt. He looked normal. That was the thing that struck me. He looked like someone you'd see at the gym or the grocery store. Clean cut, decent shape. Nothing particularly threatening except for the cold way he looked at me. "Can I help you?" he asked. Calm. Too calm. I started. "Is Jenna okay?" "She's fine. We were just having a discussion." He started to close the door. "I like to hear that from her." He stopped, opened the door wider. His whole posture changed. "You want to hear it from her?" "Sure. Hold on." He turned back into the apartment. "Jenna, honey, the neighbor wants to know if you're okay. Come tell him you're okay." She appeared behind him. Her face was red, tears still wet on her cheeks. But she was nodding. "I'm fine. Sorry for the noise. We'll keep it down." The man, I'd learn later his name was Derek, smiled at me. "See, all good. Have a nice night." He closed the door. I stood there in the hallway feeling stupid and useless. I'd done the thing you're supposed to do. I'd checked, and she'd said she was fine. But her eyes, when she'd looked at me, had been empty, defeated. I went back to my apartment and sat on my couch for 2 hours. I didn't know what to do. Calling the police seemed pointless. She'd said she was fine. He'd been calm. There was no active violence happening when I knocked. Just an argument that had gotten loud. Couples argue, but I couldn't shake the sound of her scream, or the way she'd looked when she said she was fine. I barely slept that night. The walls stayed quiet. Around dawn, I heard their door open and close. Footsteps in the hallway. A car starting. I got up and looked out my window. Derek was leaving, getting into a silver Camry. He sat in the car for a minute before starting it, just staring straight ahead. After his car pulled out of the lot, I waited about 20 minutes. Then I went next door and knocked quietly. "Jenna, it's Marcus." For next door. No answer. I tried again. "I just want to make sure you're actually okay." The door opened a crack. She looked worse in daylight. Her lip was split. Not badly, but enough to be obvious. There was a red mark on her neck that might turn into a bruise. "Please don't call the police," she said. That was the first thing out of her mouth. Not that she was fine. Not that it wasn't what it looked like. Just please don't call the police. "Jenna," I said, but she cut me off. "You don't understand. He'll make it worse. He always makes it worse when people try to help. Just please, stay out of it." She closed the door. I heard the deadbolt slide. I called in sick to work that day. Sat in my apartment trying to decide what to do. I looked up domestic violence resources online. Found articles about how leaving is the most dangerous time. How victims often defend their abusers. How well-meaning interference can escalate situations. Everything I read told me to call the police or a domestic violence hotline, to document what I'd seen and heard, to be a good witness. But they also said to respect the victim's choices, not to force anything, that they had to be ready to leave. I did nothing. That was my choice. To do nothing because I didn't know the right thing to do and I didn't want to make it worse. For the next month, I heard them through the wall. Arguments that would build and break. His voice cold and controlled even when he was angry. Hers getting smaller, more apologetic. Sometimes I'd hear him leave after a fight. Sometimes I'd hear her crying after. Sometimes both. I stopped sleeping well. Started drinking more to help me pass out before the argument started. I put on headphones and blast music or podcasts. Anything to drown out the sounds from next door. My work started to suffer. I was tired all the time, distracted. My manager asked if everything was okay, and I said I was still adjusting to the move. She looked concerned but didn't push. I saw Jenna a few more times. In the parking lot, in the hallway. She always looked tired. She'd lost weight. Started wearing long sleeves even when it got hot. We never really spoke. She'd avoid eye contact, hurry past if she saw me. I wanted to say something, do something, but what? Force her to leave when she'd explicitly asked me not to get involved. Call the police and risk making things worse. Knock on her door and offer help she'd already refused. So I did nothing. Again and again, I did nothing. Then one night, around 2 a.m, someone knocked on my door. I was half asleep, confused. I opened it without looking through the peephole. Jenna stood there with a backpack and a duffel bag. Her left eye was swollen shut. Her nose was bleeding. She was shaking so hard she could barely stand. "I need help," she whispered. "Please, I don't have anywhere else to go." I pulled her inside, locked the door, tried to figure out what to do first. She was crying again, but making almost no sound, like she'd learned to cry silently. "Is he still next door?" I asked. She shook her head. "He left. Went to cool off. He'll be back soon, though. He always comes back." "Okay, let's get you cleaned up. Then we'll figure out what to do." I helped her to the bathroom, found a clean towel, helped her clean the blood off her face. The cold water on her injuries made her wince, but she didn't make any sound. "You need to go to the hospital," I said. No hospitals. They'll call the police, and then She couldn't finish. Just started crying harder. I didn't know what to do. I'd never been in a situation like this. My instinct was to call 911, get her professional help, do everything by the book. But she was begging me not to. And something in the way she said it made me believe that calling the police would make things worse, at least for her. "You can stay here tonight," I said. "We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." She nodded, curled up on my couch with her backpack, clutched her chest. I gave her a blanket, got her water, sat in the chair across from her not knowing what else to do. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I didn't know who else to ask. Don't apologize. Just rest. You're safe here." I'm not sure she believed me. Hell, I wasn't sure I believed me. All I could think about was that Derek would come back eventually, that he'd know she came to me, that my apartment was about 15 feet away from his. I didn't sleep that night. Sat in the chair, listening for sounds from next door. Around 4, I heard his car pull back into the lot. Heard his door open and close. Then nothing for a few minutes. Then knocking. Hard knocking on her door. "Jenna, open the door. Come on, baby. I'm sorry. Let's talk about this." The knocking got louder, more insistent. "Jenna, I know you're in there. Your car is still here. Open the door." Then silence. I could almost hear him thinking, processing. Then footsteps in the hall, coming toward my door. The knock made us both jump. Jenna pulled the blanket over her head like a child hiding from monsters. "Hey, neighbor, you awake?" His voice was friendly, casual, like it was totally normal to knock on someone's door at 4 in the morning. I didn't answer. Sat frozen in the chair. "Marcus, right? Listen, I'm looking for Jenna, my girlfriend. She's upset, and I'm worried about her. You seen her?" Silence. He knocked again. Harder. "Come on, man. I saw you two talking in the parking lot a while back. She mention anything to you? Any plans to go somewhere?" I looked at Jenna. She was shaking her head frantically, silently begging me not to open the door. "Look," Derek continued, "I know she's been going through some stuff. Mental health issues, you know. Sometimes she has episodes. Says things that aren't true. Makes accusations. Her therapist says it's a trauma response from her childhood. The way he said it was so reasonable, so concerned. If I hadn't heard him screaming at her through the wall, if I hadn't seen her face, I might have believed him. If you see her, just let me know. I'm worried she might hurt herself." Then the footsteps retreated. His door opened and closed. Jenna was crying silently again, her whole body shaking. "That's what he does," she whispered. "He tells everyone I'm crazy, that I make things up. Half my friends don't talk to me anymore because he's convinced them I'm unstable." "How long has this been going on?" 3 years. She wiped her eyes. "It wasn't always like this. At first he was perfect, attentive, caring, protective. Then protective became controlling. Controlling became mean. Mean became," she gestured at her face. "Why didn't you leave before now?" She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Where would I go? He convinced me to quit my job 6 months ago. Said I didn't need to work, that he'd take care of me. Now I've got no income, no recent work history. He's on my lease, split the bills. I tried to leave once before. Got as far as my sister's place in Ohio. He showed up there with flowers and apologies. Told my family I was having a breakdown, that he just wanted to help me. They believed him. Told me I should give him another chance. The sun came up slowly. We sat in my apartment, not talking much. I made coffee. She didn't touch hers, just wrapped her hands around the warm mug. Around 8, Derek's door opened. We heard him leave, his car starting up. Jenna relaxed slightly. He's going to work. He never misses work. He'll be gone until at least 6. Okay, so we have today to figure things out. Have you thought about a domestic violence shelter? She nodded. I called one once. From work, back when I still had a job. They said they had a waiting list. Could get me in maybe 3 weeks. I went home that night, and Derek had made my favorite dinner. Was so sweet and apologetic. Said he'd been stressed but would do better. I convinced myself I didn't need the shelter. What about your family? She shook her head. They think I'm the problem, that I'm too sensitive. That Derek is a good guy who's trying his best with a difficult girlfriend. My mom actually told me I should be more grateful. Friends. He isolated me from most of them. The ones left think, she paused. They think what he tells them to think. I looked at this woman sitting on my couch with a black eye and a split lip, everything she owned in 2 bags, with nowhere to go and no one to turn to except a neighbor she barely knew. The system that was supposed to help people like her had waiting lists and procedural delays. Her support network had been systematically dismantled. She was alone. You can stay here, I said, as long as you need. She looked at me like I'd offered her something impossible. I can't. He'll figure it out eventually. He'll make your life hell. She was right. I knew she was right. But what was the alternative? Send her back next door. Tell her to wait 3 weeks for a shelter bed. Give her bus money and wish her luck. We'll figure it out, I said, with more confidence than I felt. That day, while Derek was at work, we got her stuff. I went into her apartment. It wasn't locked and grabbed what she pointed out. Clothes, toiletries, some documents she'd hidden in a tampon box because he'd never looked there. Her laptop that she'd convinced him she needed for job applications, but that he'd installed monitoring software on. The apartment looked normal. Clean, nicely decorated. There was a photo on the wall of them together, both smiling. He had his arm around her. She looked happy in the picture. I grabbed it and turned it face down on the table. Petty, maybe, but it felt good. We were in and out in 20 minutes. Back in my apartment before noon. She showed me the monitoring software on her laptop, this program that let him see everything she typed, every site she visited. We wiped it. Then she sent a carefully worded email from a coffee shop Wi-Fi network later that day. Told her old supervisor of the hospital that she needed a reference because she was trying to get back into work. Didn't mention Derek. Kept it professional. The supervisor wrote back within an hour. Said they'd love to have her back. That there was a position open on the night shift if she was interested. Jenna cried when she read it, but this time it sounded like relief. That first week was tense. Derek would come home every evening. We'd hear him in his apartment, moving around, watching TV. Sometimes he'd talk on the phone, his voice carrying through the wall, talking to friends or family, telling them he didn't know where Jenna was, that he was worried about her mental state. She's been so unstable lately, we heard him say one night. I think she might have gone off her medication. If you hear from her, please let me know. I just want to make sure she's safe. Jenna listened to this and just shook her head. I'm not on any medication. Never have been. But that's part of the story now. I'm mentally ill, and he's the long-suffering boyfriend trying to help. At night, she'd sleep on my couch. During the day, while Derek was at work, she'd go to job interviews or try to sort out her life. She moved carefully, quietly, like she was trying not to take up too much space. I gave her a key to my apartment, so she wouldn't have to wait outside if I wasn't home. Cleared out a drawer in my dresser for her clothes. Bought extra groceries. Small things that felt huge because they meant she was staying, that this wasn't just one night. Derek started knocking on my door randomly, always with some excuse. Asking to borrow things, sugar, a phone charger. Wondering if I'd seen Jenna. Mentioning casually that he'd filed a missing persons report. She's an adult, the police told me, he said through my door one evening. They won't really do anything unless there's evidence of foul play. But I filed it anyway, just to have it on record. In case. The implied threat was clear. He was building a case, creating a narrative where something had happened to her and I might be involved. I started documenting everything. Every time he knocked, every conversation, every sound through the wall. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it, but it felt important to write it down. Jenna got the job at the hospital. Night shift, which meant she'd be gone from 7 at night until 7 in the morning. It made me nervous, her being out there where Derek might see her, but she needed the income, needed to start rebuilding her independence. Her first night of work, I walked her to her car, stood there while she started it, drove away, then went back inside and sat up all night listening for Derek, wondering if he'd come knocking. Wondering what I'd do if he did. When Jenna came home the next morning, she looked exhausted but lighter somehow. Like doing something normal, something productive, had reminded her she was more than just a victim hiding in a neighbor's apartment. Derek's behavior escalated. He'd blast music late at night, bang on the walls, yell into his phone about his missing girlfriend, his voice loud enough for the whole building to hear. The other neighbors started complaining to Vernon, the landlord, who did nothing because Derek's rent was always on time and technically he wasn't breaking any rules. One morning, I found my car keyed. Deep scratches across the driver's side door. Jenna's car, which she'd had to keep parked in the same spot because moving it would signal she was still around, had 2 slashed tires. We can't prove it was him, I told her, but we both knew. She wanted to leave, said she'd figure something else out, that she couldn't let me keep paying the price for helping her. But where would she go? The shelter still had a waiting list. She'd only been at her job 2 weeks, didn't have money saved yet. Her family wouldn't help. Her friends wouldn't believe her. "You're staying," I said. "This is just property damage. We'll deal with it." But it wasn't just property damage. It was a message. I can hurt you. I can make your life difficult. I can do this for as long as it takes. I filed a police report about the keying and the slashed tires. The officer who took my statement was bored, clearly didn't think anything would come of it. "Do you have any evidence who did this?" he asked. "My neighbor. His girlfriend is—" I paused. "She left him and now he's retaliating. Is she pressing charges?" "No." "Has he threatened you directly?" "Not exactly." The officer looked at me like I was wasting his time. "File a report if something else happens. Get a camera if you're worried. There's not much we can do without evidence." I bought a security camera that night, a cheap one from Amazon that connected to my phone, pointed it at my parking spot and my door. At least if Derek did something else, I'd have proof. The camera caught him 3 days later, standing outside my car at 2 in the morning, just looking at it. Not doing anything, just standing there, then walking away. I showed the footage to Jenna. "He's trying to intimidate you," she said. "Make you nervous enough that you'll tell me to leave." It was working. I was nervous. Every sound in the hallway made me jump. I started checking the peephole before opening my door, looking over my shoulder in the parking lot, sleeping with my phone next to the bed in case I needed to call 911. This wasn't my fight. I kept thinking that. This wasn't my relationship, wasn't my problem. I was just some guy who'd heard his neighbor crying and made the mistake of caring. I could tell Jenna to go, could wash my hands of the whole situation, go back to my quiet, uninvolved life. But every time I thought about it, I'd look at her, see how hard she was trying to rebuild, how she'd force herself to eat breakfast even though her appetite was gone, how she'd meticulously apply makeup before work to cover the fading bruises, how she'd apologize constantly for existing, for taking up space, for being an inconvenience. One night, about a month after she knocked on my door, we were sitting in my apartment eating takeout. She'd started to relax, slightly, to act a little more like a person and less like a scared animal waiting for the next hit. "Why are you doing this?" she asked suddenly. "What do you mean? This? Helping me? You don't know me. You don't know me anything. Why risk all this for a stranger?" I didn't have a good answer. Because it was the right thing to do felt hollow. Because I couldn't just do nothing felt closer to the truth, but still incomplete. "I guess because someone should," I finally said. "You shouldn't have to go through this alone." She cried then, not the silent, desperate crying from before, just quiet tears running down her face. "Most people don't think that way," she said. "Most people think it's none of their business, that if it's really that bad, the victim would just leave. They don't understand how hard leaving is." We talked more that night than we had in the whole previous month. She told me about her relationship with Derek, how it had started great, how slowly, so slowly she didn't notice at first, he'd started controlling her, questioning who she talked to, checking her phone, getting upset if she went somewhere without telling him, always framed as concern, as love, as just caring about her so much. Then came the first time he'd grabbed her arm too hard during an argument. He'd apologized immediately, cried, said he didn't know what came over him. She believed him, believed it was a one-time thing, but it wasn't. It never was. The incidents got more frequent, more violent, and between each one, he'd be sweet again, bring her flowers, make her favorite dinner, promise to change. She'd believe him because she wanted to believe him, because leaving seemed harder than staying. By the time she realized how bad it had gotten, she felt trapped, financially dependent, socially isolated, emotionally exhausted. The few times she tried to talk to people about it, Derek had already laid the groundwork. She's dramatic. She's unstable. She exaggerates. She has mental health issues. I listened to all of this and felt the weight of it. The systematic destruction of a person, the careful dismantling of their support system, their confidence, their sense of reality. It wasn't just abuse. It was a campaign. Derek's campaign against me was less subtle. The next week, my job got an email, anonymous but obviously from him, saying I was harboring someone's girlfriend, that I'd interfered in their relationship, that I might be dangerous. My manager called me in and asked about it. I told her a simplified version. Neighbor in trouble, helping her out, ex-boyfriend not happy about it. She looked concerned, but said as long as it didn't affect my work, my personal life was my business. But it was affecting my work. I was tired all the time, distracted, jumping at sounds. My coworkers had started asking if I was okay. I lost weight, stopped going to the gym, stopped doing anything except going to work, and hurrying home to make sure Jenna was safe. My parents called one Sunday. I'd been avoiding them because I didn't want to explain what was happening, but they were worried because I hadn't called in weeks. Everything okay, honey, my mom asked. Yeah, just busy with work and getting settled. You sound tired. I'm tired. New job, new city, you know. We'd love to come visit. See a new place. Not yet. I'm still unpacking. Getting furniture. It's kind of a mess. She didn't push, but I could hear the concern in her voice. My parents were good people, loving. They'd raised me to help others, to stand up for what was right. But I couldn't tell them about this. Couldn't explain why I was letting a stranger live in my apartment. Couldn't describe the danger I'd put myself in without sounding either crazy or stupid. 2 months after Jenna moved in, Derek filed for an order of protection against me. Claimed I was stalking him, that I was threatening him, that I damaged his property and stolen his girlfriend. I got served at work. The paper said I couldn't come within 500 feet of him or his apartment, which was problematic since his apartment was next door to mine. Jenna was devastated when I told her. This is exactly what he does. Flips the narrative, makes himself the victim. Now you're the bad guy, and he's the one being harassed. We got a lawyer. I couldn't afford one, but Jenna found a legal aid organization that handled domestic violence adjacent cases. The lawyer, a tired woman named Ruth who looked like she'd seen this 1,000 times, explained that Derek's order was bullshit, but we'd have to fight it in court. In the meantime, technically you're violating the order just by living in your own apartment, she said. But I'll file an emergency motion. This should be dismissed quickly. It's clearly retaliatory. Should be wasn't the same as would be. We went to court 3 weeks later. Derek showed up in a suit, looking professional and concerned. He testified that I'd been harassing him since he and Jenna broke up, that I'd stolen his girlfriend, that I'd damaged his car, though he had no proof, that I'd threatened him multiple times, which was a complete lie. I testified about what I'd actually seen and heard, about Jenna showing up with a black eye, about the documented abuse, about Derek's pattern of intimidation. The judge, an older man who looked bored by the whole proceeding, dismissed Derek's order but warned me to stay away from him. Just avoid each other, he said, like it was a simple personality conflict and not a situation where a woman was hiding from her abuser in my apartment. Outside the courthouse, Derek walked past us, smiled at Jenna. See you soon, babe, he said quietly. She grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. We need to move, she whispered. He's never going to stop. We need to move. She was right. I knew she was right. But moving meant breaking my lease, finding a new place, coming up with first, last, and deposit on short notice. I didn't have that kind of money saved. I'd been living paycheck to paycheck since the move. We'll figure it out, I said again. That phrase had become my default response to everything. That night, Derek was loud. Music blasting until 3 in the morning. When I finally banged on the wall, it got louder. Jenna couldn't sleep, sat on the couch with her hands over her ears, looking small and scared again. I went to work the next day after maybe 2 hours of sleep. Made mistakes on a project I was working on. Got called into a meeting with my manager and her manager. They asked if everything was okay at home. I'm dealing with some neighbor issues, I said. It's affecting my sleep. They exchanged looks. Told me I could take some time off if I needed. Unpaid, since I'd used my PTO. I said I'd be fine, that I'd work it out. But I wasn't fine. Nothing was fine. We were living in this weird state of siege. Derek on one side of the wall, us on the other. Both waiting for the other to make a move. Jenna's sister called one day. Jenna put her on speaker, so I could hear. Mom's worried about you, her sister said. Derek stopped by last week. Said you've been having some kind of breakdown, that you disappeared and he's been trying to find you. I'm not having a breakdown. I left him because he was abusive. That's not what he says. He seems really worried about you. Mom thinks you should at least call him. I'm not calling him. I'm safe. I have a job. I'm okay. Her sister sighed. Look, I know you two had problems, but don't you think you're being a little dramatic? Derek said you've been telling people he hit you. That's a serious accusation. Because it's true. He said you'd say that you've been confused reality with your anxiety sometimes. Jenna hung up, sat there staring at her phone. My own sister, she said. She believes him over me. This was Derek's genius. He didn't just abuse Jenna. He systematically destroyed her credibility, created a narrative where she was unstable and he was concerned, turned her own family against her, made it so that every time she told the truth, people thought she was lying. 3 months in, something changed. Derek went quiet. The music stopped. The knocking stopped. We'd still hear him moving around next door, but he wasn't actively harassing us anymore. It made us more nervous, not less, waiting for whatever he was planning. The shoe dropped 2 weeks later. Jenna came home from work to find her car missing. Not stolen, repossessed. Turned out Derek had convinced her to put his name on the title months ago, for insurance purposes, he'd said. Then he'd reported it stolen. The police couldn't help. His name was on the title. Technically, it was his right to take it, even though Jenna had been making the payments. Even though it was her car. She took the bus after that. I tried to drive her when our schedules lined up, but the hospital was across town and her shifts were at odd hours. She'd spend 90 minutes on 2 buses to get to work, 90 minutes back. I started looking at apartments in other neighborhoods. Places farther from my job, but maybe safer. Jenna contributed what she could from her paychecks, but it wasn't much. Night shift at a hospital didn't pay as well as people thought. We found a place across town. Smaller than my current apartment, more expensive, but it would work. We'd have to share a bedroom, could pull out the couch or get an air mattress. It felt weird, moving in together when we weren't dating, when we barely knew each other. But what choice did we have? I gave Vernon notice, told him I was moving out. He shrugged, said he'd keep my deposit to cover cleaning and damages. I wanted to argue that there were no damages, but I just wanted out. Jenna didn't give notice on her apartment because Derek was still on that lease and she wasn't going back there. We packed up my stuff over a week. Not much. I'd only been there 6 months. Mostly clothes and kitchen stuff and some books. Jenna had her 2 bags, hadn't accumulated anything more because she didn't want to feel settled. Moving day was a Saturday. I rented a U-Haul, got some guys from work to help carry the heavy stuff. We loaded up everything in a few hours. The whole time, Derek's car was parked in his spot. He was home, watching probably. As we were loading the last boxes, he came out, stood in the parking lot with his arms crossed. Were you 2 off to? He asked. Casual, like he was making conversation. None of your business, I said. He walked closer. Those guys from work tensed up, probably picking up on the energy. Moving in together. That's cute. Playing house. Jenna was in my passenger seat. Doors locked, staring straight ahead. You know she'll leave you too? Eventually, Derek continued. That's what she does. Things get hard and she runs. Probably already planning her exit. One of my coworkers, a big guy named James, stepped forward. Man, leave him alone. Derek looked at him, then at the rest of us. Held up his hands. Hey, just making conversation. No harm. He looked at Jenna through the windshield. Bye, babe. See you around. We drove away with him, standing in the parking lot, watching. In the rearview mirror, I saw him get out his phone, probably taking a picture of the license plate. The new apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building with better security. He fobbed again the main door. Actual neighbors who seemed to be home and aware of their surroundings. It felt safer immediately. We unloaded everything, and I returned the U-Haul. When I got back, Jenna had started unpacking, making the place feel lived in. She bought groceries and was making dinner. Thank you, she said when I walked in. For all of this. I know it's not what you signed up for when you moved to the city. Nobody signs up for this, I said. But we're managing. Are we? She looked around the small apartment. You've completely upended your life for someone you barely know. You've spent thousands of dollars. Gotten your car keyed, your job threatened, a court order filed against you. For what? Because it's right, I said. But even as I said it, I was wondering. Was it right? Was any of this worth it? Would have been better to have never knocked on her door that first night. Never gotten involved. But looking at her, alive and relatively safe, I couldn't regret it. She'd have stayed with Derek, would have kept getting hurt. Eventually, he might have killed her. That's how these things ended sometimes. I'd read enough articles to know. We fell into a routine in the new place. She worked nights, I worked days. We'd overlap in the mornings, have coffee together before she went to sleep and I went to work. It was surprisingly domestic, comfortable, but Derek was still out there, still calling her family and friends, maintaining his narrative, still looking for her, we assumed, though we didn't know for sure. For months after we moved, Jenna got a promotion at work. More responsibility, more money, day shift. She was thrilled. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely happy. We went out to dinner to celebrate. Nothing fancy, just a chain restaurant near our apartment. But it felt significant, like we were turning a corner, like maybe things would actually be okay. In the parking lot afterward, walking back to my car, someone called her name. Jenna. We turned. Derek was standing by a truck, not his Camry, a borrowed vehicle, maybe, or a rental. He walked toward us slowly. Jenna grabbed my arm. We need to go. But Derek was between us and my car. We could run, maybe make it back to the restaurant. But Jenna was frozen, her whole body rigid. Derek stopped about 10 feet away, held up his hands like he was harmless. I've been looking for you, he said. We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about, Jenna said. Her voice was surprisingly steady. 3 hours of talking. That's all I'm asking. You owe me that much. After everything we had, I don't owe you anything. His expression changed. The friendly mask dropped. Yes, you do. You don't get to just disappear. Make me look crazy in front of everyone. Ruin my reputation. Your reputation ruined itself, I said. Leave us alone. Derek looked at me like he'd forgotten I was there. You think you're some kind of hero. Taking in a crazy woman. Believing her lies. She's using you, man. Can't you see that? I pulled out my phone. I'm calling the police. Go ahead. Where are you going to tell them? That I said hi to my ex-girlfriend in a parking lot. That's not illegal. He was right. We were in public. He wasn't threatening us. Not directly. Wasn't doing anything a cop would care about. But then he took a step closer. Jenna, come on. Let's just talk. Alone. 5 minutes. No, she said. I'm not talking to you. Not alone. Not ever. Something in his face changed again. Became cold. Fine. We'll do this the hard way then. He turned and walked back to his truck. Got in. Sat there watching us. We hurried to my car. I started it and pulled out quickly. He followed us. Not all the way home. That would have been too obvious. But out of the parking lot, onto the main road for about 2 miles. Then he turned off, disappeared. But the message was clear. I found you. I can find you again. Jenna was shaking when we got back to the apartment. Couldn't stop shaking. I made her tea, sat with her, told her it would be okay, even though I didn't know if it would be. That night, she slept on the couch instead of in the bedroom like she'd been doing recently. Said she couldn't relax, needed to be near the door. I sat up with her most of the night, both of us listening for sounds in the hallway that never came. We filed another police report. The officer who took it was sympathetic but realistic. He approached you in a public place, said he wanted to talk. That's not illegal. The following you part is concerning, but he stopped after a few miles. Unless he makes an explicit threat or shows up at your home, there's not much we can do. What are we supposed to do, Jenna asked. Wait until he attacks me. The officer looked uncomfortable. Get a restraining order. Document everything. If he violates it, we can arrest him. She tried to get a restraining order before. Derek's lawyer had argued she was being vindictive. The judge had denied it. We doubled down on security. Got a better lock for the door. A video doorbell that recorded everyone who approached. Started varying our routines, go to different grocery stores, taking different routes to work. But the encounter in the parking lot had changed something. Jenna was scared again in a way she hadn't been in months. Started jumping at sounds. Losing weight again. Sleeping poorly. I was angry. At Derek for being a psychopath. At the system for failing to protect her. At myself for not being able to fix this. For thinking moving apartments would solve anything. 6 months in the new place. My lease was coming up for renewal. The rent was going up significantly. I couldn't afford it on my own, and Jenna's income wasn't enough to split it comfortably. We'd have to move again. Keep running. Hope Derek didn't find us next time. Is this just what life is now? Jenna asked one night. Moving every year. Looking over our shoulders. Never feeling safe. I didn't have an answer, because maybe it was. Maybe there was no happy ending here. Maybe the best we could hope for was survival. for Jenna to stay alive and eventually rebuild something resembling a normal life. The system had failed her at every turn. Police who couldn't act without evidence of imminent harm. Courts that gave abusers the benefit of the doubt. A society that questioned why she didn't just leave, while simultaneously making it almost impossible for her to leave safely. And me, some random neighbor who decided to help, who'd given her a place to stay and probably save her life, but couldn't actually solve anything. Couldn't make Derek disappear. Couldn't undo the trauma. Couldn't give her back the 3 years he'd stolen. We started looking for new apartments, further from my job, cheaper neighborhoods, places where maybe Derek wouldn't think to look. The night we were supposed to sign a lease on a new place, Derek showed up at my job, walked right into the building, asked the receptionist for me by name, said he was a friend. When I came down to the lobby, he was sitting there casual as anything. Security called the police immediately. Derek went quietly, smiling the whole time. Didn't resist. Told the cops it was all a misunderstanding, that he was just trying to talk to me. They let him go with a warning. My boss called me the next day, said this couldn't keep happening, that other employees were uncomfortable, that maybe I needed to take an extended leave to sort out my personal situation. I'm trying, I told her. It's not my fault my girlfriend's ex is harassing us. Maybe not, but it's affecting the workplace. I'm sorry, Marcus. I like you, but I need you to take some time. It wasn't quite firing me, but it was close. I was put on unpaid leave indefinitely, told I could come back when things calmed down. I went home and told Jenna. She cried, said this was all her fault, that she was destroying my life just like Derek had destroyed hers. Stop, I said. This is Derek's fault, not yours. He's the one doing this, but I'm the reason he's doing it to you. She wasn't wrong. If I'd never helped her, my life would be fine. I'd still have my job, my security, my peace of mind, but she'd probably be dead. That's a choice I'd made. Help and suffer consequences, or don't help and live with knowing I could have done something. We moved to the new apartment without me having a job. Signed a lease I wasn't sure I could afford. Hoped I'd find work quickly. Derek found us within 2 weeks. I don't know how. We'd been careful, but one day Jenna came home from work and there was a note on our door. Miss you, babe. We should catch up. We called the police. They took the note as evidence. Said they'd increase patrols in our area, but they couldn't arrest him for leaving a note. That night, we talked about extreme solutions. Jenna leaving the state, moving in with distant relatives, changing her name, going completely off the grid. But all of that required money we didn't have, stability we didn't have, and it still wouldn't guarantee Derek wouldn't find her eventually. Some problems don't have solutions, Jenna said. Maybe this is just how it is now. I wanted to argue, to say we'd figured out, to promise it would get better, but I couldn't, because looking at our situation, at how thoroughly Derek had managed to insert himself into our lives despite our best efforts, I wasn't sure it would get better. We've been dealing with this for 8 months. 8 months of fear and instability and constantly looking over our shoulders. 8 months of Derek finding new ways to terrorize us while staying just barely on the legal side of harassment. The system wasn't built to protect people like Jenna. It was built to react after something terrible happened. And by then it was usually too late. I found work eventually. Contract position, less money, no benefits. But it was something. Jenna kept working her shifts, kept rebuilding. We functioned, survived, waited for the next time Derek would show up. A year after Jenna first knocked on my door, we were sitting in our apartment on a Friday night. Too tired to go out, too broke to do much anyway. The TV was on, but neither of us was really watching. Do you regret it? She asked, helping me. I thought about it, really thought about it. I lost a good job, thousands of dollars, my peace of mind, probably years off my life from stress. I was living in a crappy apartment with a woman I barely knew, constantly afraid of her psychotic ex. No, I said, I don't regret it. Liar, she said, but she was smiling slightly. I'm serious. This whole situation sucks. But you're alive. You're working. You're rebuilding. That's worth something. Is it worth what it cost you? I didn't answer, because I honestly didn't know. In my better moments, I believed helping her was the right choice. That watching someone suffer and doing nothing would have been worse. In my worst moments, I wondered what I'd been thinking. Why I'd throw my whole life away for someone else's problem. But there was no going back. The choice was made. We were in this together now, for better or worse. Derek was still out there, still looking for opportunities to hurt us, still maintaining his story that he was the victim and we were the villains, still getting away with it because the system allowed men like him to terrorize their victims with minimal consequences. We learned to live with it, the fear, the instability, the knowledge that our lives could be upended at any moment. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't really an ending at all. But Jenna was alive. That had to count for something. Some nights, I still heard her crying through the wall. Except now, it was the same wall, the same apartment. And I could actually do something. Make tea. Sit with her. Remind her she wasn't alone. It wasn't much. It didn't fix anything. But it was better than doing nothing. I still think about that second night in my old apartment. Lying in my sleeping bag, hearing her cry, deciding not to knock on her door. How close I came to just putting in earplugs and going back to sleep. If I had, everything would be different. My life would be simpler, probably better by most conventional measures. But Jenna would still be with Derek, still getting hurt, still isolated and trapped and slowly losing herself. So no, I don't regret it, even though it cost me everything, even though Derek is still out there. Even though this story doesn't have a satisfying ending where justice prevails and everyone lives happily ever after. Sometimes helping someone just means keeping them alive, giving them a chance to rebuild, standing between them and the person who wants to destroy them. It's messy and expensive and scary. It's not heroic. It's just what you do when you can't stand by and do nothing anymore. Even when doing something ruins your life too.